Hey everyone, before I get too deep into all these SHTF recipes and all of that, I want to go over some of the why with long-term food storage rather than just the how, and then we'll get back into the recipes and everything. Recently, Lisa and I just did a podcast on long-term food storage ideas, food and water storage ideas for preppers. But I also wanted to put this in video form. I know a lot of people don't listen to podcasts. Some people don't stray too far from YouTube. So I wanted to put this in video form as well. And I want to do it before I get too deep into all these different recipes. So the reason why food storage and water storage is so important for preppers is because it encompasses all the different types of disasters that we think about. It could be something as simple as a job loss, or it could be something as big as the grid going out for a long period of time. Whereas like security and all of that different stuff, that may be necessary for quite a number of different scenarios. Food and water is kind of the main staples of preparedness. Whenever anybody thinks of the typical prepper, just the average Joe thinking of a typical prepper, they usually think food storage, which, could be good or bad for us. If we're putting out there that we're preppers, and then somebody's going to think automatically, hey, they've got a year's worth of food, they got a lot of food stored, whether we do or not. They're going to think that. So that's why it's so important to kind of keep that under wraps as much as possible. With food storage, though, the reason there's a lot of different reasons why it's important, and how we do it is just as important because we don't want to be wasting a lot of money and stuff. But the average person these days doesn't have a lot of food in their house. So if something happened for even just a week, after a couple days, they would be pretty screwed, I suppose. A lot of people, because everybody's daily lives are so busy these days, a lot of people don't even have all that much food in their house to begin with. Sometimes they just go out to eat every night. That's their routine. They stop on their way to work and they stop on their way back from work. And that's also kind of why you see all these pictures of these store shelves that after a disaster or whatever, after something happens, the store shelves are all empty. That's because the stores themselves only have a few days worth of inventory on hand anyway, and that's in normal situations. So when something big happens and everybody's rushing the store, that stuff goes away pretty quickly. And another reason that it's good to have some food storage of your own is you don't want to put yourself in that situation. If you can stay away from the store when it's like that, you're keeping yourself out of dangerous situations, or situations that could turn into dangerous situations. So that's why it's important to have some of this stuff already on hand. Now, what you get at the store is just as important. And you've probably heard the saying a million times, store what you eat what you store. And if you haven't, if you're just getting into preparedness, you're going to hear it a lot. But at its very basic level, it's basically to save you money. If you eat corn, if you eat green beans, if you eat all that stuff, then store it because you know it's not going to just get wasted. But at the same time, it goes a little bit deeper into that because with us, we like to eat fresh vegetables as much as possible. But if those vegetables aren't available, sometimes it's easier just to do the frozen vegetables. And then third on our list is the canned stuff. So say you go to the store and there's a big sale on, we'll just use corn as an example, big sale on corn, canned corn. You can get 10, 15 of those cans. But if every night when you cook dinner, you're using the frozen vegetables or fresh vegetables, those cans are just going to sit on the shelf and not ever get used. So you're wasting, even though it's a good sale, you're still wasting your money. So what Lisa and I try to do is incorporate that in our diet. Now, we don't eat that every night because fresh vegetables have far more nutrients than frozen vegetables, and frozen vegetables more than canned vegetables. So what we try to do is once or twice a week, we'll use one of those cans. So let's say that once a week we're using a can of corn or a can of green beans, or twice a week we're using a can of corn or a can of green beans. That means over the course of a year, we can store 100 of those cans knowing that they're going to get used. But canned foods last, some, it depends on what you get, but some more than a year, a couple years actually. But I use a year as an example because I know if I can use 100 cans of whatever, and this could be mixed or matched, then I know I can store those and not worry about them being wasted or sitting on the shelf and not getting used. So, and 100 cans is quite a bit. So that's one of those things with store what you eat what you store, is you want to make sure that you're using this stuff. Now, granted, a lot of this long-term stuff isn't as healthy as, the regular food that the fresh food and stuff like that. But if we incorporate that, even just small amounts, into our diet, then we're using that stuff on a regular basis, and it's not going to go bad. And we can do our inventory once every 3 months or so. You can do it once a month like I do. I try to do a small inventory once a month and then a big inventory every 3 to 6 months, just to make sure I've got what I think I have and nothing is expired. And if it is expired, I need to rethink my storage process. So with all of that, what you need to do is set a goal. And this is kind of how I do it. And it really depends on your storage space, your family size, your income. All of that different stuff is going to depend on what your food storage is. So just because somebody says you need a year's worth of food, you need this or you need that, that might not work for you. And you need to do what you can comfortably do with your food storage. And by comfortably, I mean, you don't want to go out. You don't want to be so scared. You're going out, you're spending all your money on food storage and all that. Then you can't pay your rent, or you can't pay, your public service or anything like that. So do something that you can comfortably afford. Set a goal. And if that's just getting a few extra cans or a little bit each month, or maybe getting yourself up to where you're prepared for a week, and then kind of build on that afterwards. But set up a goal. Look at your monthly budget. There's a lot of money that we tend to waste in a month that we could use for stuff like that. If we go to Starbucks and we get a coffee every morning, that's $5 a day. If we're going out to lunch, that's $5 a day. There's a lot of things that we spend money on. I was talking about this in Brian Duff's podcast, Mine for Survival podcast. We tend to nickel and dime ourselves to death to where we think we don't have the money that we actually could have. And if we pay attention to our budget, if we pay attention to what we're spending on a daily basis, we'd be surprised at how much money we just kind of throw away or use without even, $5 here, $1 or $2 there. It's not much, but at the end of the month, that can add up to $100, $150. So pay attention to your budget, figure out what you can do, figure out what you can kind of cut back and use that into your prepping budget, and figure out exactly how you want to get this food storage plan going, or how you want to keep it going. So before we get out of here, I want to talk about a few of the different types of long-term food storage. If you've been doing this for a while, you probably know already. Like I said, I've got the podcast and an article at survivalistprepper.net. If you want to read that, I'll make sure and leave a link below, or listen to the podcast. I'll leave that link below as well. But in the show, we talked about some different types of long-term food storage. Some are pretty simple. Some are, the simple ones are going to cost you a little bit more money, but the other options, they're going to cost you a little bit more time. So it's one of those things. What do you have more of? Do you have more time, or do you have more money? The shelf-stable foods, those are the easiest way to bulk up your food storage. That's the stuff you eat on a regular basis, like the canned foods, the pasta, the beans, even the boxed meals. Maybe you eat the boxed meals, Hamburger Helper, stuff like that. That stuff lasts a long time in your pantry. I mean, not super long, but it lasts long enough to where if it was a disaster that was a couple months, you would be able to, as long as you had power or you had options to cook that stuff without power, you're going to be okay. It's not the 25-year shelf life stuff or anything, but this is the stuff that you use on a regular basis that you can go through and you don't have to worry about it being spoiled. If nothing happens at all, you've just got a lot of extra food and it's getting used all the time, so you don't have to worry about it spoiling. That's the first option. The second option is the prepackaged long-term food like we sell at the SHTF shop. What I like about prepackaged long-term food is it's a quick way to add to your food storage. Say you've got an extra $100, $150 and you just want to have some stuff that is going to add 2-3 weeks, a month, or whatever you want. It's going to add that much time to your food storage plan. And it's stuff it's really convenient. You just basically you put it in the closet and it's going to be there. To me, it's like insurance. That's going to be there. You know, it's not something you eat on a regular basis, but it's going to be there if something happens. And it's something you don't have to worry about rotation all that much. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. You just need to store it correctly. And in a terrible situation, that stuff's going to be there for you. Now, another option when it comes to kind of the same style, that really long-term stuff, is doing your own DIY buckets. And I've got a couple of videos on these. I even put a couple of the videos in the show notes itself. Two of them, the one where I did the buckets myself, those aren't on YouTube, so you'd have to go to the article and watch those. But long-term buckets are a great way, because you're buying in bulk. It's a great way to save money on, say, if you use flour a lot, if you use rice a lot, if you use beans a lot. It's a great way to save money by buying in bulk, but it does take a little bit of work to get these done. And it's even, a little bit work once you have them done. It's not like you just reach into your cupboard, grab a bag of flour. You've got to go down into your storage. You've got to grab the bucket, open that up, take some of that flour out. What I do is I put it in a smaller container that I keep upstairs. And then when that gets empty, I go back down and refill it. But it's going to take a little bit more work than, the long-term food storage stuff, or, just going to the store and buying a bag of flour. It's going to take the great thing about the long-term prepackaged stuff, like we saw at the SHTF shop, is it's good to go. Somebody's done all the work for you. Whereas with the buckets, it's not brain surgery or anything, but you have to put that work in. You have to put that stuff together. But it can save you quite a bit of money. The long-term food storage stuff, the prepackaged stuff, is probably, on average, it's about double the cost of what it takes to do a DIY food bucket. So it's one of those things. What do you have more time of? If you have more money than you have time, then maybe go with the prepackaged food. If you have more time than money, then do those DIY 5-gallon buckets. It can save you quite a bit of money. One more I have here is canning food, and it's a great way. If you're gardening, stuff like that, I'll talk about gardening in a bit, but if you garden or anything like that, it's a great way of preserving your harvest. It's a great way if you can find good deals on even meat or vegetables or anything that where you buy in bulk. You can can those up and you can have those at a later date. Canning lasts quite a long time. I think the recommendation is like a year and a half, but depending on you, it could be different. I'll just put it that way. But canning isn't brain surgery. It does require some skill. It requires you to learn how to do it. But once you get it, it's the whole process is pretty basic. I did a video recently when I purchased the electric pressure canner, the carry canner, and how I use that for canning meat and stuff. That's for small batches, but it's a good, convenient idea for canning right in the kitchen, especially since I have the glass top stove and all of that. Next one I have here is gardening, and gardening is a great way to feed your family really fresh and nutritious food. It does require a lot of time, a lot of skill, a lot of space, and a whole bunch of trial and error. As you do it year after year, you're going to get a little bit better at it. And you've got predators and animals and all that stuff to think about. But as I said, as you get better at it, the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. But this is important because eventually the stuff we have stored, depending on the disaster situation, all that stuff could run out. And gardening gives us that sustainable option. Granted, it's not, depending on where you live, it's not year round, but there is an option where you can grow your own food. It doesn't cost you anything other than, maybe the seeds or whatever, but that's a good option. Dehydrating food is another great option for storing stuff long term. Dehydrating and even smoking meats and stuff like that is a good idea. Now, some of these machines can be pretty costly, the really cool dehydrators out there. I did a video in the past, I've got it on the article too, where I did my homemade dehydrator. And while it works really good, there's only so much you can do with it in a certain amount of time. And I mean, it basically takes all day to do a little bit of beef jerky like I did in that video. But that's a good option. I've never smoked meats or anything like that, but from what I've seen, again, it's like any of these other skills. It takes a little bit of learning. You have to have the space and the ability to do that, but that could be a good idea as well. Now, freezing food, when we're talking about long-term food storage stuff, Freezing food is a great option right now. If we want to save some money and we want to have enough food in our freezer and not have to go to the grocery store every week and all that. But remember that in an SHTF situation, you may not have electricity. So all of that food that you have in there, you're going to need options to preserve that food. Now, for us out here in Colorado in the wintertime, maybe, that wouldn't be such a big deal. We just take it out and we put it outside because it's going to be cool enough. In the summertime, that's a completely different situation. So while freezing food is a good option, I don't really suggest that we have a freezer in our garage, but we don't use it for a lot of stuff, because if the grid goes down, that stuff is going with it, basically, if we don't have other options of preserving it. That's why I got the carry pressure canners, because I want to be able to can some stuff instead of just freezing it. So that's basically it on the different food storage ideas. I wanted to mainly talk about the why we do all of this stuff. And in the future, as I do more of these videos, I'm going to go through some of the different techniques, and I'm going to use only the things that are going to be available to me. So I'm going to be using the sun oven. I'll be using the Dutch oven. I'll be using the propane grill outside to see if, I can make tortillas and stuff like that. I'm going to be testing out some of this long-term food and see how it works. And I'm going to be testing out some of the buckets I made and show you the process of that, making bread and stuff. Bread is great. Bread is a good filler in an SHTF type situation. But how are you going to bake that bread? And that, there's a few different options, but the oven is not going to be one. So, but anyway, if you're not subscribed, make sure to subscribe to this channel or this playlist. And like I said in the last video, over the course of the next few months, I'm going to do quite a few different videos. If you have any ideas of videos, say you want to learn how to make tortillas or something like that, or what different types of foods are going to be an option in a situation like that, just leave a comment below or send me an email to dale@survivalistprepper.net, and I'll get those answered. But anyway, we'll talk to everybody later.